More than 80 million copies of the Da Vinci Code have been sold worldwide, making Dan Brown's 2003 novel one of the biggest bestsellers in history. 3 years after the book's publication, the big screen adaptation was also a blockbuster success.
When you think that within 2 years of publication in 2003, it had sold 20 million copies, then a little over 80 million by the end of the decade, those are impressive figures. It really struck a chord with the public.
From its opening lines, the novel lays out a suspenseful tale with all the ingredients for an international hit. A murder at the Louvre Museum in Paris sparks a hunt for history's hidden messages.
It's a thriller. It's a mystery. You are going along on this journey with the main characters, solving the clues alongside them in a way that sort of pulls you through to this dramatic conclusion.
As they set out to solve the murder, the book's main characters uncover mysterious symbols hidden in the masterpieces of the Louvre, an obscure brotherhood linked to the medieval Knights Templar, intriguing details Leonardo da Vinci included in his paintings, and the significance of a particular biblical figure, Mary Magdalene.
Leonardo da Vinci is the perfect historical figure to spin a mystery around because he leaves all these breadcrumbs that the curious mind wants to follow.
The clues in the Da Vinci Code lead to one explosive revelation: that Jesus Christ had descendants, a hidden divine bloodline, the incarnation of the Holy Grail itself. Religion, art, and history. Dan Brown's plot gripped the public imagination, blurring the line between fact and fiction. So just how much of the novel is rooted in historical truth? Were the Knights Templar really the armed wing of a secret organization? What is the true meaning of Leonardo da Vinci's works? And is the Holy Grail actually linked to Mary Magdalene? Did she really bear Jesus' child?
History is spectacular, a combination of love, passion, hatred, violence, and betrayal.
From the very beginnings of Christianity through the early Middle Ages, historians take us on a journey through time. Looking at the symbols hidden within the greatest works of the Renaissance, they shed light on some of the inspirations behind the Da Vinci Code.
Stop now.
Tell me what it is.
Dan Brown's fictional story starts with a literal bang. Jacques Saunière, curator of the Louvre, is murdered right in the middle of the museum's Grande Galerie. The stage is set for this thriller. With the opening scene of the Da Vinci Code, the book takes readers on a whirlwind mystery through the world's largest and most prestigious museum.
The Louvre is possibly the most magnificent museum in the world. In terms of its art collection, its paintings, it really is second to none. And some of the paintings inside that museum, things like the Mona Lisa, things like Caravaggio's work, these have fascinated and intrigued people for centuries. Where better to start looking for art historical clues than in the Louvre?
Dan Brown's trail starts here, with the symbols scattered around the museum's Renaissance artworks. Before long, the book's protagonists discovered that Leonardo da Vinci, an artist whose work features prominently in the Louvre, was part of a mysterious brotherhood. In his paintings, he has hidden ancient secrets, revelations about the origins of Christianity, and the private life of Jesus Christ. The book follows Professor Robert Langdon and cryptologist Sophie Neveu as they investigate one of Christianity's greatest mysteries.
One of the big themes running through the book is the mystical question surrounding the history of Catholicism, the many undisclosed and unacknowledged hidden secrets in the story of the Christian religion. All the elements for an eventful story are there in the Grande Galerie, since the Catholic Church was the main sponsor of Italian painting from the Renaissance period right up to the 19th century.
The iconic artworks of the Louvre aren't just a backdrop to Dan Brown's story. They are a catalyst. Masterpiece after masterpiece. Brown selected specific works that serve as bridges between art and religion. Upon closer examination, certain similarities are revealed in these artworks, as if they're all linked by a common language of codes and symbols.
These artworks are all behind the characters, and every one of them is loaded with symbolism, loaded with religious meaning. So it's like the characters are already placed on this complicated canvas of codes that we, the reader, the viewer, we are going along on that journey, and we have to start decoding them as well.
Historian Yanina Ramirez is an expert in the interpretation of symbols, something like the real-life counterpart of Robert Langdon, the symbologist at the center of the Da Vinci Code.
How do we sift truth from belief? How do we write our own histories, personally or culturally, and thereby define ourselves? How do we penetrate years, centuries of historical distortion to find original truth? Tonight, this will be our quest.
Those questions are central to the Da Vinci Code. It's an investigation into the very heart of Christianity, where every clue, every artwork, and every religious symbol is a piece of a giant jigsaw puzzle. And who better to drive this plot forward than the ultimate master himself, the book's eponymous figure, Leonardo da Vinci.
Leonardo da Vinci is the perfect historical figure to spin a mystery around because he was the ultimate polymath. He was an artist and a scientist, and he was endlessly curious. So he leaves all these breadcrumbs that the curious mind wants to follow.
The Vitruvian Man. It's one of Leonardo da Vinci's most famous sketches.
And Dan Brown puts this artwork at the forefront of his religious thriller. To understand its significance, we need to consider the context of the late 15th century, a time when science and the study of nature were increasingly seen as a means of getting closer to the divine and revealing God's creative power. Leonardo da Vinci believed this too.
For Leonardo, artists were the creators who can get closest to God and better understand Him. To that end, they cannot limit themselves, as artists of the time did, to so-called artistic anatomy, in other words, understanding how to represent muscles. They need to get inside the muscles, to open them up, to look at the bones, to cut into them. Leonardo was a man who had to keep going deeper and deeper because he wanted to unravel the mystery of divine creativity.
Leonardo da Vinci was obsessed with understanding everything, right down to the bone. He left behind thousands of pages filled with sketches and notes, detailing his rigorous studies of biology, botany, animal anatomy, and in particular, human anatomy. Vitruvian Man was a distillation of this research.
What's interesting is that the drawing has explanatory notes that allow us to decode and understand what is represented. The perfect proportions of the human body must follow a rule. Each part, each limb of the human body has to be in proportion to the whole.
So if you see how Leonardo has laid it out, it's very clear where the different joins come in the body. You can see that he's sort of split the body up into these different components that are each elements of a mathematical equation.
Leonardo's detailed studies resulted in this drawing of the perfect man. But it is the final element that gives the work its religious significance. A symbolic detail that makes this more than just a representation of the human body.
The perfectly proportioned man must fit into a circle, legs apart, or into a square, legs together. The square represents the 4 cardinal points, which are always associated with the earth, while the circle is the symbol of infinity and therefore the sky. So this drawing really captures what Renaissance man is all about. He is copula mundi, that is to say, a being that is both earthly and heavenly, a link between earth and sky.
Leonardo uses powerful symbols in Vitruvian Man to elevate the human form to the divine. And the Da Vinci Code sets out to unpack them. In Dan Brown's narrative, Leonardo embedded religious codes throughout his work because the Florentine master was not just an artist. He was also the head of a mysterious secret society, an obscure, centuries-old organization closely linked to Christianity's greatest secrets.
The Priory of Sion is a myth, one of the world's oldest and most secret societies, with leaders like Sir Isaac Newton, Da Vinci himself. The fleur-de-lis is their crest. They're guardians of a secret they supposedly refer to as the Dark Con of Man.
But what secret?
The Priory of Sion protects the source of God's power on Earth.
The plot for the Da Vinci Code begins to take shape. Art, religion, Leonardo and his works, all linked by an enigmatic secret society called the Priory of Sion. The Priory's aim is to protect the true source of divine power. So why has no one ever heard of it? Did this society truly exist? The Priory of Sion, a European secret society founded in 1099, is a real organization. In 1975, Paris's Bibliothèque Nationale discovered parchments known as les dossiers secrets, identifying numerous members of the Priory of Sion, including Sir Isaac Newton, Botticelli, Victor Hugo, and Leonardo da Vinci. In the preface to his book, Dan Brown notes that the Priory of Sion did in fact exist. But while it's true that there are files archived in France's National Library, the Bibliothèque Nationale, the history of this organization is far less storied than you might think.
Sure, the Priory of Sion has a history, but it's a very recent one. It was started by a man named Pierre Plantard, who set it up as an association in 1956, albeit very briefly, since it was founded in the spring and by October had ceased virtually all activity. The idea was to create a neo-chivalric order in the Catholic tradition that would defend, in the vision of Pierre Plantard, the memory and descent of the Merovingians, whose last surviving son he proclaimed himself to be. The
Priory of Sion was a pure fiction created by Plantard. He even went so far as to fabricate a list of Grand Masters, whom he claimed had been at the head of the organization through the centuries. But eventually, the truth came out. All the documents stamped by the Bibliothèque Nationale were forgeries. There is nothing medieval about the Priory of Sion. So why does Dan Brown embrace it?
So while the Priory of Sion itself doesn't exist, I think what Dan Brown is tapping into is something that has always been there within Christianity and within European Christianity certainly, which is this idea of small groups, esoteric groups, shared wisdom, things that are passed down from generation to generation.
In Brown's imagination, the Priory of Sion was linked to a very real and controversial organization. A religious order that left its mark on the history of Christianity and the kingdoms of Europe. The Order of the Temple, founded in the early 12th century. Brown builds on this history in his novel, using an event that really did happen, the First Crusade.
It all started over 1,000 years ago when a French king conquered the holy city of Jerusalem. This crusade, one of the most massive, sweeping in history, was actually orchestrated by a secret brotherhood, the Priory of Sion, and their military arm, the Knights Templar.
Historian Philippe Josserand is an expert on the Order of the Temple and its storied members, the Knights Templar. He studies their history to separate fact from fiction.
The Order of the Temple came out of the Crusade. That's to say, the armed mobilization that took place in the West at the Pope's behest, when tens of thousands of men and women set off for the East, sometimes by ship, but more often on foot, by land, on a very long journey to Jerusalem, which they captured. So in 1099, Jerusalem was taken from the Muslims, ending more than 400 years of Islamic history in Jerusalem and returning the holy city to Christianity, which regarded it as the very heart of its religion.
It was through bloodshed and violence that the Crusaders conquered the Holy Land. Once under Christian rule, control of these territories remained fragile. Pilgrimages to Jerusalem were a dangerous undertaking. It was against this backdrop that an idea was born: the creation of an order that would be both military and religious. This led to the establishment of the Knights Templar.
For the first time, two essential medieval activities that had until now seemed at odds with one another, or at least unrelated, were combined together. Prayer, the domain of the monk, and combat, that of the knight. This was a revolution in the history of Christianity, and a development that was not readily accepted.
Right from the outset, the very existence of the Knights Templar was controversial and decried by many contemporaries. That's something Dan Brown seized upon when developing his fiction. In the book, protagonist Robert Langdon gives his take on why this unique organization was formed. The idea of protection of pilgrims was the guise under which the Templars ran their mission. Their true goal in the Holy Land was to retrieve the documents from beneath the ruins of the temple. It had taken 9 years, but the knights finally found what they had been searching for. They took the treasure from the temple and traveled to Europe, where their influence seemed to solidify overnight. The Knights Templar as guardians of a treasure. But what kind of treasure? Vast material wealth? Or was it, as the Da Vinci Code posits, a powerful secret? The fictional documents mentioned in the book appear to be just that. Historians say there is no trace of them. Still, it is true that the Knights Templar exercised great influence.
They were the sort of military arm of the pilgrim market. So they would protect travelers, tourists, if you like. Numerous people would travel across Europe to get to the holy sites. And it was dangerous. You could be attacked, you could have all your property stolen. The Templars provided this sort of security, if you like, to get you on your pilgrimages. But they also were the first international bankers. The Templars developed this way that you could cash money when you left your location and then exchange it when you arrived in another place so that you wouldn't have to carry wealth with you on the way. So they're bankers, they're soldiers, but they still have this attachment to something mysterious, something that ties back to the time of Jesus Christ.
In the space of just a few decades, the Knights Templar grew increasingly important as they established themselves throughout the Western world. The temple received financial support from the Pope and the nobility. Donations poured in from far and wide to support their work in the Holy Land. A network developed throughout all the great kingdoms, one that could recruit fighters and transport goods wherever they were needed. This military religious order became a very powerful organization with hundreds of castles and estates under its control. But part of what made the Order of the Temple so controversial was the seemingly unconditional trust placed in them by some of the most powerful people in the world. A troubling state of affairs that, for Dan Brown, provided excellent fodder for a work of fiction. In the Da Vinci Code, the Templars held a secret that guaranteed their power. One of the most striking examples of the Templars' meteoric rise took place in 1158 in Gisors, Normandy, roughly 40 years after the creation of the Order of the Temple. At the time, conflict raged between the French and English kingdoms, and the Templars were about to play a key role.
Gisors really was a key geopolitical location in the early 12th century, at the heart of the Duchy of Normandy's fortified defenses against the Kingdom of France. The Duchy of Normandy's prince was also the King of England. So a whole series of chateaux was set up, notably here at Gisors, facing its overlord and enemy, the King of France.
In the 12th century, amid tensions between the two greatest powers in the West, it was the newly formed Knights Templar who were called in to guarantee a truce. The Château de Gisors, a key link in the frontier, was entrusted to them for 3 years, pending a peace agreement.
The Order of the Temple acted as guarantor in certain royal decisions, giving it an important role as mediator. It played a diplomatic role whenever tensions arose between princes, and Gisors was where this mediation took place.
This political clout went hand in hand with the Order's extraordinary economic, military, and religious power. In London, the Knights Templar built residences and an iconic church. In Paris, they constructed a massive monastery and even guarded the royal treasury. While the sudden rise of the order is still a source of speculation today, Its brutal fall is what drives the narrative of the Da Vinci Code. After 200 years of dominance, things began to change for the Knights Templar.
By the 1300s, the Templars had grown too powerful, too threatening. So the Vatican issued secret orders to be opened simultaneously all across Europe. The Pope had declared the Knights Templar Satan worshippers and said God had charged him with cleansing the earth of these heretics. The plan went off like clockwork. The Templars were all but exterminated. The date was October 13th, 1307, a Friday.
Part of that's true. In the early 14th century, the Knights Templar did indeed come to an abrupt end. In the Da Vinci Code, it's the papacy who pulled the strings. But historians tell another story. It was the King of France, Philip the Fair, who sought to reduce the power of the Templars. His motivation was far more political than religious.
The Order of the Temple answered solely to the Pope, and if they had to be judged, only the Pope could judge them. So Philip the Fair's edict violated the law of the day, as he was all too aware. But he had to show that the Brotherhood was guilty of heresy, and this, of course, is where torture was introduced on a massive scale.
It was a major turning point, and the Order of the Temple vanished as quickly as it had appeared. 7 centuries later, material traces of its existence are hard to find. In major European cities that were loyal to them, street names have survived. And in some cases, churches have been restored or rebuilt. To this day, the Brotherhood continues to arouse controversy. For some, a hidden secret is the only explanation for such a meteoric rise and fall. Could it be that famous treasure? The reality is, centuries of searching have unearthed no concrete evidence of any treasure. But what if that was because the treasure was not concrete? Something symbolic rather than material? A secret. That's the theory Dan Brown explores in his plot. After this detour into the Middle Ages, the plot of the Da Vinci Code approaches its moment of truth. The power acquired by the Knights Templar, the group's sudden fall, and the legend surrounding its treasure all converge around one central revelation. To get there, a secret message, coded by Leonardo da Vinci himself, must be unraveled. The novel's titular Da Vinci Code gives us Dan Brown's spin on one of the Florentine master's most emblematic works.
I trust you recognize the Last Supper, the great fresco by Leonardo da Vinci. And my dear, if you would close your eyes.
Lee, save us the parlor tricks.
You asked for my help, I recall. Allow an old man his indulgences.
It took Leonardo 3 years to paint this monumental fresco. It's nearly 9 meters long, demonstrating obsessive attention to detail. Everything in it means something.
Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, that fresco in Milan that we can still see in all its glory today, it is a complicated painting, and it is something that Leonardo would clearly have thought very, very carefully about, because that image, Christ in the middle with the apostles around him, that is the church, all of the church. It might just be a group of people, a group of 12, 13 figures, but actually what it represents is something so much bigger than that. It's the universal church.
The meal shared by Jesus and his disciples on Maundy Thursday is rich in symbolism. It's a major theme, one that's been depicted numerous times. It was during this scene that Jesus instituted a sacrament still celebrated today at every Mass, the Eucharist. The bread and wine consumed represent the body and blood of Christ, offered for the salvation of the world. His apostles are gathered all around him, including Judas.
Traditional iconography shows the traitor being designated. In other words, in the moment Judas is identified as the one who will betray Christ. Judas was usually depicted either at the end of the table or on the other side, so that he could more easily be identified by the faithful. Leonardo chooses a different point in the story of the Last Supper, a moment when Judas has not yet decided on his course of action and has not yet betrayed Christ. This is when Jesus announces to his disciples that one of them will betray him, but we don't yet know which one it will be. Judas, who can choose between good and evil, has not yet made up his mind.
And while they were eating, he said to them, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." They were deeply grieved and began to ask him one after another, "Surely not I, Lord?"
Leonardo loves this moment. Why? Because it's got the most pathos. It's the most tragic moment, the moment of greatest tension. It produces a very intense and powerful emotional reaction among the disciples. And each individual, which is what interested Leonardo, is reacting differently. He captures this wave of emotion, which takes perceptible shape through the range of gestures and facial expressions.
À l'interaction aussi des disciples entre eux.
Added to the way the disciples interact with one another, the viewer's gaze is guided by the series of gestures and hand movements that lead us to the face of Christ.
In the center, Jesus remains calm and steady amid the storm. Light is streaming in from the windows behind him, creating a halo-like effect. In the middle of the apostles, gathered 3 by 3, he forms a perfect equilateral triangle. Jesus' right hand mirrors that of Judas, who has yet to act. But Judas's other hand holds the purse of silver, a symbol of his betrayal. At his shoulder, St. Peter is recognizable by his beard and white hair. He keeps watch, knife in hand, always ready to defend Christ. Every detail is charged with significance. And perhaps that's what Dan Brown likes best about Leonardo.
To be fair to Dan Brown, Leonardo da Vinci is an artist who deliberately puts symbols in his artworks that can have multiple meanings, can be interpreted in different ways. We are being asked to read this painting.
This is what the narrative in the Da Vinci Code asks us to do too, while offering new and surprising twists.
Now, mademoiselle, where is Jesus sitting?
In the middle.
Good. He and his disciples are breaking bread. And what drink?
Wine. They drank wine.
Splendid. And one final question. How many wine glasses are there on the table?
One. The Holy Grail.
Open your eyes. No single cup. No chalice. Well, that's a bit strange, isn't it? Considering both the Bible and standard Grail legends celebrate this moment as the definitive arrival of the Holy Grail.
The missing Grail at the table is the starting point for the hypothesis presented to the protagonists, Robert and Sophie. Their attention is then drawn to the figure on Jesus' right. Traditionally identified as John, they're told this person is actually a woman, evidenced by the graceful curve of the neck, soft features, long hair, and slender, delicately intertwined hands. Specifically, this is Mary Magdalene, theorized to be Jesus' wife. Now back to the Grail. What if it wasn't really missing? Our attention is drawn to the large V between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, a V that designates both a chalice and the symbol of the female figure, her sex and her womb. Specifically, her capacity to bear life. Dan Brown finally reveals his Da Vinci Code. Mary Magdalene was Jesus' companion and bore his child, the beginning of a holy bloodline. In the Da Vinci Code, all these clues point to the revelation of a secret carefully buried by the Church. The only reason it has survived through the centuries is because people have protected it. First, the Knights Templar, with their roots in the Holy Land. Then, Leonardo da Vinci, depicted as one of the leading figures in the Priory of Sion, a secret society formed to protect this heritage.
From the very beginning, what you see is that Dan Brown is combining lots of different disciplinary approaches: history, theology, fantasy, art history, to pull together the evidence and make it work for the storyline he's trying to tell. But the way he puts those pieces of the puzzle together, that needs a little bit of unpacking.
Let's start with the most astonishing claim, that the figure at Jesus' side in the Last Supper isn't John, but rather Mary Magdalene. That would be a monumental revelation.
I'm looking here at a replica of Leonardo da Vinci's famous painting, The Last Supper. This is a very important moment in the Bible. This is the point at which Jesus has gathered his apostles, the people that will go on to found the church. But the one that has always attracted attention in terms of the Da Vinci Code is this figure here, seated on the right hand of Jesus, the sort of sacred space. And in the book, the characters are asked to look at this figure and see a woman. But this is to entirely misunderstand an entire tradition within religious art of how this particular character, who is in fact John the Evangelist, is depicted.
Saint John, the youngest of the apostles, is always depicted without a beard. In addition to his naive appearance, his youth and innocence are also conveyed by the gentleness of his features and his position. John is always seated beside Christ and sometimes falls asleep during the dinner.
Like Judas, St. John is easily recognizable. His image is in line with traditional depictions. Seeing a woman's features in his representation says more about the stereotypes of our modern age, say experts, than any supposed truth concealed by Leonardo. Now, what about the absence of the Grail, the second key point in the book's narrative? The fact that there's not a large chalice in the center of the table is actually not surprising, experts agree. Leonardo da Vinci decided to capture the moment immediately before bread is broken and wine drunk. But in the Da Vinci Code, its absence becomes yet another clue.
Now, Dan Brown asks us to see a V shape here and interprets that V as the sacred feminine, as if it is a chalice, a womb, a representation of the bloodline, the sang real. I don't think that's what's going on at all. The reason for this composition is it highlights the emphasis on Christ in the center, but it is not what Dan Brown wants us to see. He has taken a very specific, modern understanding of a symbol, seen it in the background, in the negative space, and then layered up this painting with his own version of what it means.
In Dan Brown's telling, a hidden grail in the middle of the Last Supper reveals the union between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. It's a bold interpretation, and a controversial one. But then, so is the history of the Grail within Christian tradition.
There's no record of a Holy Grail after Jesus' death. It's not one of the relics associated with him. If it was, it would be really powerful, because unlike the saints, Jesus doesn't leave behind many relics. His body ascends into heaven, so you can't keep one of his fingers. So his associated relics, things he touched, things that he engaged with, would carry this incredible Christian power. And so if there was a chalice, if there was a Holy Grail, it would have been recorded, it would have been found, it would be hidden somewhere, and it would be reported on.
So where does this legend of the chalice come from? A chalice that Jesus drank from, and which later collected his blood on the cross. It's been a source of fascination for storytellers over the centuries, and a key part of the King Arthur epics in the Middle Ages. According to medieval historian and novelist Sharon Newman, this myth was incorporated into Western Christianity thanks to its appeal.
The Grail is part of the Christian mythology that was created because they needed it. They wanted something that was part of their culture, not just from the East. In the Middle East, you had all of the sites of Christianity. You had where Jesus was born, where he preached, where he died. And so the Eastern Christianity had all the good stuff. They had all the stuff, the proofs. And Western Christianity needed something to make themselves proud.
Considered in that light, the original myth of the Grail could be seen as supporting Dan Brown's reinterpretation of the legend.
The seeking of the Grail is actually the seeking of pure innocence and pure fidelity to religion. There was no physical thing in the early Arthurian stories.
The fact that it becomes something in the medieval period, it starts to be written about in romances, then it allows the imagination basically to add anything to that object that you could possibly want. It can be anything, the Holy Grail. In one way, what Dan Brown has done is he has actually made people return to the concept of the Holy Grail and really quiz it, really interrogate it. What really was it? Did it even exist?
No, the Grail has never been a cup. It is quite literally this ancient symbol of womanhood. And in this case, a woman who carried a secret so powerful that if revealed, it would devastate the very foundations of Christianity.
The Da Vinci Code narrative ultimately arrives at the logical conclusion, finding the descendants of Christ. In Dan Brown's story, reconnecting with the divine means reconnecting with a certain incarnation of the feminine. The quest for the Grail points toward the figure of Mary Magdalene. This mysterious figure reflects age-old debates within the church itself. But who was Mary Magdalene, really?
Mary Magdalene is a biblical character who has constantly changed her interpretations down the centuries. At first, she's this biblical figure who appears at Christ's resurrection, at his crucifixion, but slowly she starts to develop other layers of symbolism. So she gets married up with this other figure in the Bible, the penitential sinner, the prostitute who cleans Christ's feet with oil and with her own hair to seek forgiveness for her sins.
The problem is that nowadays, people seem to think that it was one person. And there wasn't. There were a lot of Marys in Israel at that time. There still are. So when they aren't clear about it, over the centuries, people decided, well, okay, Mary, we'll just put them all together. It's so much simpler. All of these Marys were mushed together. So it was another example of women being written out of history and out of religion, because it became so easy for male theologians. It said, oh yes, well, Mary was a bad person. That means all women are bad. Therefore, men should be in charge. It was simply that women were not important. So who cares if there were 4 instead of 1?
Historians and theologians reject the idea that Mary Magdalene was the wife of Jesus and bore his children.
This hypothesis has no historical basis. It contradicts the writings in the Gospels, and more importantly, it contradicts the profound nature of Christ, since in the Christian tradition, Christ is both God and man. We know about the affinity between Christ and Mary Magdalene, likewise the affinity between Christ and the Apostle John. But of course, any carnal relationship, any sexual relationship, cannot be understood in the light of what Christ is.
For some, the lack of evidence for the revelations in the Da Vinci Code may be disappointing. Still, the book raised real questions about Mary Magdalene's legacy and how women have been perceived throughout Christian history.
But what's really interesting about this development in her reputation is it ties in with the, I think, increasing misogyny of the Christian church. That she was there in the beginning, that she was a follower of Jesus, that there were many, many women involved with the early church. That becomes streamlined down the centuries, and women start to be cast either as the Virgin Mary, sort of an unobtainably perfect, pure woman, or a fallen woman, someone like Eve who commits the original sin. And Mary Magdalene vacillates between these two.
Like the murmurs of spirits in the darkness, forgotten words echoed. The quest for the Holy Grail is the quest to kneel before the bones of Mary Magdalene, a journey to pray at the feet of the outcast one. The Da Vinci Code explores Mary Magdalene's legacy, placing her at the center of a new kind of intrigue. And in a twist, Dan Brown makes the cryptologist Sophie Neveu her descendant.
I think the thing that most annoys me about Dan Brown and the Da Vinci Code is this assumption that Mary Magdalene has to have a baby, has to be the wife of Jesus. It's really misunderstanding centuries of women's role within the Christian church. Women have had a fundamental role right from the beginning. Today we might think of it as a very top male-heavy institution, but women are saints. Women are representing all the virtues. Women are right up there next to Jesus with the Virgin Mary and Mary Magdalene either side of him. So you can't take your modern perceptions and look backwards through time, slanting all the evidence to suit your agenda.
What will you do? The legend will be revealed when the heir reveals himself.
They just got the pronoun wrong.
More than 2 decades after its publication, the Da Vinci Code continues to make its mark.
The thing that makes the Da Vinci Code so compelling is, at its heart, it's a thriller. It's a mystery. You are going along on this journey with the main characters, solving the clues alongside them, and having all this information revealed to you in a way that sort of pulls you through to this dramatic conclusion.
While the book and its controversial themes have gripped and fascinated readers, the Da Vinci Code has also drawn criticism. Dan Brown takes liberties with history, blurring the line between what's real and what's fictional.
Being a historian shouldn't prevent you from enjoying the book. I certainly did, although I obviously didn't regard it as a work of history. As we all know, it's literary fiction, not a thesis, maybe even a marketing trick. So the book is a narrative drawn from the realm of myth. And in that regard, I think it's extremely successful.
One aspect of the novel I think is important is the way it draws the public's attention to the fact that works of art hide secret meanings and hide messages that might not be immediately accessible on first viewing. The idea of going deeper beyond what you see, I think, is important when examining a painting.
And in the end, exploring art and history with a sharp eye, all the better perhaps to understand ourselves, is what the Da Vinci Code is all about.